Let's start here by looking at the difference between two shells, Dragon on the left and Raptor on the right. Dragon is the most aggressive design available and is characterized by its 4 protrusions. The aerodynamics of the shell force the owner to consider which way the shell will spin, left or right, clockwise or counterclockwise, but either way, this is a hard-hitting design with a short runtime intended for taking out shells with greater stamina. Shells like Raptor. Raptor runs just about the same whether it spins left or right. It has sweeping curves to increase runtime and minimize recoil, keeping its aggressive points concealed. Both Dragon and Raptor have the same underside parts and the same grip, so it's their upper aggressive components which really inform their behavior. Let's see how they run. Dragon first, then Raptor. So there's Dragon, with a runtime of about 145. I'm using a 20cm string for this video, which is quite short, but the comparison should scale nicely with a longer string. Now let's see Raptor. Starting to develop a significant wobble there. So even with better aerodynamics, this time Raptor did not spin for as long as Dragon. See, there are a number of factors which can affect runtime which we need to consider. Obviously the power and stability of the launch play a large part, but also the surface the shell is running on, and the fine-tuning of the balance. This time we noticed the shell started to wobble around 30 seconds into the run. That's not great, and might explain the problem. So let's have a look at why that wobble seems so pronounced. Just to be clear, a certain amount of wobble will always occur in aggressive shell designs due to the interrupted airflow. So for this example, the Raptor shell shows how all shells are equally affected by this issue. Also, silver shell components are laser cut to a tolerance of 0.01 of a millimeter. That's pretty good, but even with Raptor's aerodynamic shape, the variation can be exaggerated when stacked in layers. Because the tolerances average out across the shell, the impact is minimized, but it's still a factor. More important this time is the nuts. The rotation of the nuts is set by you when you build your shell. So the good news is, this part you can actually control. You will notice the points of the nuts may not be uniform when compared with the radial axis of the shell. Checking their rotation relative to the center of the shell makes this more obvious. Now, you can see the difference. One nut has its pointy angles facing the center of the shell, while the other has its flat surfaces facing the center. This difference can accentuate the wobble of the shell. So let's have a look at how to tune your shell to minimize the impact of the nuts on its wobble. To work with the nuts, you'll have to loosen them. It's easier just to do them all at once. Don't remove them, just loosen them. With the nuts loosened, you'll be tempted to jump straight in and line up the nuts with your spanner, but you'll notice this is almost impossible now that the bolts are loose. A better method is to stabilize the nut with your spanner instead. Just hold the nut in place while you turn the bolt itself with your small key. In all of Silvershell, it is general good practice to turn the bolts with your keys rather than turning the nuts with your spanner. It is easier and more effective this way. When you're finished with one bolt, move on to the next. The process can take about 5 minutes to begin with, but that time will fall by more than half once you get the hang of it. It's a lot easier off camera too. Let's skip to the end. Once you've lined up all your nuts, just check them quickly with your spanner to ensure they are secure. So now the pointy parts of each nut are facing the center of the shell. Congratulations, you've tuned your shell. Obviously, this doesn't solve the almost microscopic tolerance of the components themselves or compensate for running the shell on a rough or uneven surface like we have been in this video. But by minimizing the wobble as best we can through methods we can control, we can be pretty sure to increase the runtime and stability of our shells and gain an advantage over opponents who don't show the same level of care. So in that way, tuning your shells can mean the difference between victory and defeat. That is worth it. Let's see how the tuned shell goes. Okay, we're starting to see some wobble develop around 1 minute into the run. Last time, without tuning, the wobble developed around 30 seconds in. Well, that's a longer runtime overall, but importantly, the ratio of the wobble is reduced. At 2 minutes 12 seconds, the shell spent 45% of its runtime wobble-free. Without tuning, it ran for 1 minute 27 seconds, and spent only 20% of that runtime without wobble, which essentially means tuning has doubled the smooth runtime of the shell. So a finely tuned shell runs better for longer, and in a fight, that can make all the difference. Keep fighting, guys.